those stories at the time. There's stories about almost everything.
Yeah, that's the
About
thing.
how you didn't get along. You had
No,
didn't like one
no,
another.
we didn't get along. We were four guys. We had rows. It never got in the way of the music, no matter how bad the row was. Once the count-in, we all gave our best. And that was a little later, too.
What if the Beatles weren't as united as we all believed? And the truth behind their tension changes everything you thought you knew. Most people think the Beatles were always in perfect harmony, like the music they created. But Ringo Starr just revealed something that completely changes that image, because behind the legendary songs and global fame, things were far more complicated than anyone imagined. Ringo, the quiet backbone of the band, opened up about the truth that fans rarely hear. And what he said makes you look at the Beatles in a totally different way. He admitted that there were times when they simply couldn't get along. Not just small disagreements, but real tension that built up over time. At first, everything felt natural, four young guys enjoying music and success together. But as the fame exploded, so did the pressure, and that pressure slowly started affecting their relationships. John Lennon and Paul McCartney, both incredibly strong personalities, often clashed over creative control. And what started as healthy collaboration turned into quiet competition. George Harrison, who was growing as a songwriter, began to feel pushed aside, like his voice wasn't being heard enough. And Ringo could see it all happening, even if he didn't always say it out loud. The energy in the studio started to shift, and instead of excitement, there were moments of silence, moments where no one knew what to say, moments where even being in the same room felt uncomfortable. Ringo revealed that during the recording of the White Album, things got so tense that he actually left the band for a while, something many fans still don't fully realize. Imagine being part of the biggest band in the world and still feeling like you don't belong. That's exactly how he described it, like he was an outsider in his own group. But what makes his story so powerful is that he doesn't say it with anger. He says it with honesty, like someone who has had years to reflect and understand what really happened. He explains that they were all young, dealing with a level of fame that no one had experienced before, and they were trying to grow not just as musicians but as individuals. And sometimes that growth pulled them apart instead of bringing them closer. Communication started breaking down, conversations became shorter, more distant, and decisions that used to be made together started to feel divided. Yet somehow, despite all of this, they kept creating music that would change the world forever. That's what makes this story so fascinating. Because even when they weren't getting along, even when the tension was real, the music never lost its magic. It's almost like the conflict itself became part of what made their sound so powerful. Something raw, something real that you could feel in every note. Ringo doesn't try to pretend everything was perfect. He doesn't rewrite history to make it look better. Instead, he gives us something much more real, and that truth makes the Beatles' story even more powerful than before. Because now, we see them not just as legends, but as real people dealing with real emotions, trying to hold everything together while the world watched them from the outside. Vort Wendendes, Ringo continues to talk about those years. One thing becomes clear: the Beatles' story isn't just about success, it's about how hard it was to stay together under that level of pressure. Fame changed everything, almost overnight. And suddenly, their lives were no longer their own. Every move was watched, every word analyzed. And that kind of attention slowly started to create distance between them. What used to feel simple became complicated. Even small disagreements started to feel bigger than they actually were. And the joy of playing together sometimes got lost in expectations. Ringo explains that everyone in the band wanted to evolve, to push music forward, to try new ideas, but they didn't always agree on how to do that, and that's where the cracks really started to show. George Harrison began to step forward more with his own ideas, his own songs, And while he had so much to offer, he often felt like he was still standing in the shadow of Lennon and McCartney. Ringo saw this clearly. He understood the frustration, because even though he wasn't always in the spotlight, he was always paying attention to what was happening around him. He also talks about how silence became more common, not the comfortable kind, but the kind that creates distance, the kind where no one wants to say the wrong thing, so nothing gets said at all. Those quiet moments slowly built up, and over time, they became impossible to ignore. But what's interesting is that Ringo doesn't see these struggles as something negative. Instead, he sees them as part of what made the Beatles so unique. He believes that some of their best work came from those difficult moments, when emotions were high and everything felt uncertain, because that's when they pushed boundaries the most. It's a strange kind of balance, conflict and creativity, existing side by side and somehow turning into something timeless. Looking back now, Ringo speaks with a sense of peace, like he has accepted everything that happened and understands it in a deeper way. He doesn't focus on what went wrong, he focuses on what they achieved together. And that perspective changes everything. Because it reminds us that even the greatest partnerships aren't perfect. Even the strongest bonds can face challenges. And sometimes things don't last forever. But that doesn't make them any less meaningful. In fact, it might be the imperfections that make them even more real, even more relatable. Ringo's honesty doesn't take away from the Beatles' legacy, it adds to it, because now we see the full story, not just the music and the fame, but the reality behind it all. And maybe that's why their story still matters today, because it's not just about what they created, it's about what they went through to create it, and how even when everything was falling apart, they still managed to leave behind something that the world will never forget.